The warning light screamed across every panel in the cockpit. Jake Morrison gripped the controls with white knuckles as his small scout vessel spun through the atmosphere of the unknown planet below. Smoke filled the cabin and the smell of burning circuits made his eyes water. Come on, Jake muttered through gritted teeth, fighting to level out the craft. The left engine was completely dead and the right one was failing fast. He had maybe 30 seconds before this turned from a rough landing into a fatal crash. The planet's surface rushed up to meet him. Thick jungle stretched in every direction, a sea of purple and green vegetation that looked nothing like Earth's forests. Jake aimed for what looked like a clearing, pulled back hard on the stick and braced for impact. The scout vessel hit the ground hard. Metal shrieked as it tore through alien trees and plowed across the earth. Jake's head snapped forward against his harness and everything went dark for a moment. When his vision cleared, the ship had finally stopped moving. He was alive. Jake unbuckled with shaking hands and checked himself over. His left arm hurt badly and blood ran from a cut on his forehead, but nothing seemed broken. He grabbed the emergency kit from under his seat, his sidearm, and what rations he could carry. The ship's hull was cracked open in 3 places and sparks still flew from the control panel. This vessel would never fly again. Outside, the air was thick and humid. Strange sounds echoed through the jungle, calls and cries from creatures he had never heard before. Jake activated his scanner, but it gave mostly static. Whatever had brought him down had fried most of his equipment. The distress beacon showed a weak green light, so maybe it was working. Maybe someone would pick up his signal. Maybe. For now, he needed to find shelter and water. Jake checked his compass and started walking, keeping his hand near his weapon. Every shadow seemed to hide something dangerous. Every sound made him jump. He had trained for situations like this, but training and reality were very different things. He walked for over an hour before he heard it, a sound that made his blood run cold. It was a scream, high-pitched and terrified, and it sounded like a child. Jake ran toward the sound without thinking. He crashed through the undergrowth, branches whipping at his face. The screaming got louder and he could hear other sounds now too. Snarling, growling, the sounds of predators. He burst into a small clearing and stopped dead. A child stood pressed against a large rock and she was not human. Her skin was pale blue with patterns that glowed softly like starlight. She had large eyes, too large for her small face, and they were wide with terror. She wore simple clothing and could not have been more than 6 or 7 years old, by human standards anyway. Circling her were 3 creatures that looked like a nightmare mixture of a big cat and a lizard. They were massive, each one easily 300 pounds of muscle and claws. Their eyes were fixed on the child and saliva dripped from their jaws. They had not noticed Jake yet. The child saw him though. Her glowing eyes locked onto his and she made a small, desperate sound. One of the creatures tensed, ready to pounce. Jake did not hesitate. He pulled his weapon and fired 3 shots in quick succession. The sound was deafening in the jungle. The first creature yelped and fell, the second one turned toward him with a roar, and the third scattered into the brush. The second creature charged at Jake with terrifying speed. He fired again, but his shot went wide. The beast leaped and Jake threw himself to the side, feeling claws rake across his shoulder. Pain exploded down his arm, but he rolled and came up firing. This time his shots hit home and the creature collapsed 5 feet away from him. Jake stood there breathing hard, his weapon still raised, scanning for the third predator. The jungle had gone quiet. After a long moment, he heard it crashing away through the undergrowth, fleeing. He had won, but barely. He turned to the child. She was still pressed against the rock, trembling all over. Her glowing patterns flickered rapidly in what might have been fear or shock. Jake slowly lowered his weapon and held up his empty hand in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. "It's okay," he said softly, even though she could not possibly understand his words. "I won't hurt you. You're safe now." The child stared at him for a long moment. Then, to his surprise, she took a small step toward him. Then another. She was still shaking, but something in her seemed to recognize that he had saved her. She made a soft, chirping sound, almost like a question. Jake knelt down slowly, making himself less threatening. "That's it. I'm a friend. Can you understand me at all?" He pointed to himself. "Jake, my name is Jake." The child tilted her head, studying him with those huge eyes. She pointed to herself and made a musical sound that Jake could not hope to repeat. It sounded like wind chimes mixed with birdsong. He smiled despite the pain in his arm and shoulder. "I'm going to call you Little Star," he said. gesturing to the glowing patterns on her skin. Because you light up like one. Is that okay? She seemed to understand his friendly tone even if not his words. She took another step closer, then reached out with one small hand and touched his arm. Her fingers were cool and had an extra joint that human fingers lacked. She chirped again, more urgently this time, and pointed deeper into the jungle. You want to go home? Jake asked. I bet your family is looking for you. Come on, little star, let's get you home. But as he stood up, his vision swam. The adrenaline was wearing off and his injuries were catching up with him. Blood still ran from the claw marks on his shoulder and his earlier head wound. The child saw him sway and grabbed his hand with surprising strength for someone so small. Jake looked around the clearing. The sun was already getting low in the sky, painting the purple jungle in shades of orange and red. He had no idea where this child's home was, and traveling at night through this jungle would be suicide. They needed shelter. Change of plans, he said to Little Star, who watched him with concern in her large eyes. We camp here tonight. Tomorrow we find your family. Using his training, Jake set up a basic camp. He cleared an area near the rock face, gathered wood for a fire, and checked his supplies. He had enough rations for 3 days if he was careful. He also had basic first aid supplies, which he badly needed right now. Little Star watched everything he did with intense curiosity. When he started treating his wounds, she made concerned chirping sounds and tried to help in her own way, bringing him soft leaves that might have been medicinal. Jake smiled at her efforts. Thank you, Little Star, you're a good helper. As darkness fell, Jake got the fire going. The flames seemed to fascinate the child. She sat close to it, her glowing patterns pulsing in rhythm with the flickering light. Jake opened one of his ration packs and offered half to her. She sniffed it suspiciously at first, then took a tiny bite. Her face lit up with what had to be pleasure, and she chirped happily, eating the rest quickly. Jake could not help but smile. Despite everything, despite being stranded on an alien world with injuries and no way home, he felt good about what he had done today. He had saved a life. That counted for something. As the night grew darker, strange sounds echoed through the jungle. Some were close and some were far away, but all of them sounded dangerous. Little Star moved closer to Jake, clearly frightened. Without thinking, Jake put his arm around her small shoulders. It's okay, he said quietly. I've got you. Nothing is going to hurt you while I'm here. I promise. She looked up at him and made a soft, musical sound. Then she leaned against him and closed her eyes. Within minutes, she was asleep, trusting this strange alien being completely. Jake sat by the fire, keeping watch through the night. His shoulder throbbed and his head ached, but he stayed alert. Every rustle in the bushes made his hand move toward his weapon. He fed the fire regularly, keeping the flames high. Most predators feared fire. He hoped that was true here, too. As the hours passed, Jake thought about his situation. His ship was destroyed. His distress beacon might be working or might not. Even if it was, this planet was far off the normal patrol routes. It could be days or even weeks before anyone found him, and now he had a child to protect, a child who was not even his species. The smart thing would be to focus on his own survival, find water, find food, build a better shelter, but Jake knew he could not do that. Not while this little one needed him. He had made her a promise even if she could not understand the words. He would keep her safe and get her home, whatever it took. Dawn came slowly, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. Little Star woke up and stretched, her patterns glowing brightly in the morning light. She seemed refreshed and less frightened than the night before. She looked at Jake and chirped a greeting that sounded almost cheerful. Good morning to you too, Jake said with a tired smile. He had not slept at all, but he could rest later. Ready to find your family? He gathered his gear and kicked dirt over the fire. Little Star took his hand without being asked, and they started walking. She seemed to have some idea of which direction to go, tugging him gently to the left whenever he started to drift right. They walked for over an hour through the dense jungle. Jake's injuries protested every step, but he pushed through the pain. Little Star chattered to him in her musical language, clearly trying to communicate something. He wished desperately that he could understand her. Jake kept his hands raised high as the aliens closed in around him. His weapon was still holstered at his hip, but he made no move toward it. Any sudden movement right now would probably be his last. The energy weapons aimed at him hummed with power, and the warriors holding them looked ready to fire at the slightest provocation. The large female, still holding Little Star, spoke rapidly in her language. Her voice was musical but had an edge of command that needed no translation. She was clearly the leader here. The child responded, gesturing toward Jake and speaking in urgent, animated tones. Her small hands pointed to the clearing where the attack had happened, then to Jake, then back to herself. The female listened, her large eyes never leaving Jake's face. The other warriors shifted nervously, weapons still trained on him. The tension in the clearing was thick enough to cut with a knife. Little Star squirmed in her mother's arms until she was put down. Then, to Jake's surprise and clear alarm from the warriors, she ran back to him. She grabbed his hand and tugged on it, speaking rapidly in her language. She seemed to be trying to explain something to make them understand. The female leader said something sharp and Little Star responded, but did not let go of Jake's hand. Instead, she pressed close to his side as if protecting him. The gesture was small, but the meaning was clear. She trusted him. She wanted her people to trust him too. The leader studied this for a long moment. Then she reached to her belt and pulled out a small device. She pressed several buttons on it and held it up. When she spoke, her voice came out in 2 layers. Her own musical language, and underneath it, translated words that Jake could actually understand. "You are human," she said. It was not a question but a statement. "Your kind are known to us, but you have never come to this world before. Why are you here?" Jake swallowed hard, his mouth dry. "My ship crashed," he said, speaking slowly and clearly. "I did not mean to come here. It was an accident." The device in her hand hummed as it worked, translating his words back to her language. The female tilted her head slightly, processing this information. "And my daughter? How did you come to be with my daughter?" "I found her in the jungle. She was being attacked by predators. 3 of them, like big hunting animals. I drove them off and saved her." Jake glanced down at Little Star, who was still holding his hand. "I was trying to help her find her way home when you found us." The translation device worked and the female's expression shifted. Something flickered across her face that might have been surprise or recognition. She spoke to one of the warriors, who nodded and disappeared into the jungle. Then she turned back to Jake. "I am Matriarch Kesavara," she said through the translator. "This child is Shiana, my daughter and heir to my line. She wandered from our city during the evening ceremony 2 days ago. We have been searching ever since. 2 days. Jake's stomach tightened. This child had been alone in that dangerous jungle for 2 days before he found her. It was a miracle she had survived at all. "I am Lieutenant Jake Morrison," he replied. "I am glad I was able to help her. She is very brave." Kesavara looked down at her daughter and said something gentle in their language. Shiana responded enthusiastically, clearly telling her mother the full story of what had happened. She made gestures that mimicked the attacking creatures, then pointed to Jake and made shooting motions with her small hands. The warrior who had left returned, carrying something wrapped in leaves. He spoke to Kesavara and she examined what he brought. Her patterns flashed brightly and she looked at Jake with new intensity. "My scout found the clearing where you fought the predators," she said. "He found 2 dead Tereshkar. These are among the most dangerous hunters in our jungles. Adult warriors with full weapons have been killed by them." She paused, her eyes boring into him. "You killed 2 of them with that small weapon at your side while already injured. And you did this to save a child who was not your own species." Jake did not know what to say to that. It felt strange to be praised for something that had seemed so obvious at the time. "Anyone would have done the same," he said finally. "She was a child in danger. I could not just walk away." Kesavara made a sound that the translator did not interpret, but her expression was complex. She spoke to her warriors and they slowly lowered their weapons. The tension in the clearing eased slightly, though the warriors still watched Jake carefully. "Lieutenant Jake Morrison," Kesavara said formally, "by the ancient laws of our people, you have created a bond that cannot be broken. You saved my daughter's life when death was certain. You protected her through the night and sought to return her to her family. This creates what we call Kesthor. In your language, the closest meaning is soul guardian bond." Jake felt a chill run down his spine despite the warm air. Something in the way she said it suggested this was more serious than a simple thank you. "I am honored," he said carefully, "but I do not understand what that means for your people." "It means you are now bound to my family line," Kesavara explained. "It means you have earned a debt that can never be fully repaid. It means you will be honored and protected as one of our own." She gestured to her warriors. "You will come with us to our city. You will be given quarters, medical treatment, and everything you need. This is not a request, Lieutenant Morrison. This is law. The way she said it made Jake pause. I am grateful for your help, he said slowly, but my people will be looking for me. My distress beacon might bring a rescue ship. I should probably stay near my crash site. Your vessel is too damaged to be seen from orbit, one of the warriors said through his own translator. We found it. It is destroyed. Your beacon signal is very weak. If your people do come, we will bring them to you. But you will not wait in the jungle. You will come to our city where you can heal and be properly honored. There was something in their tone that made Jake uneasy. But what choice did he have? He was injured, stranded, and surrounded by armed warriors, and they were right that his ship was beyond repair. If rescue came, they could find him anywhere on this planet. Then I accept your hospitality with gratitude, Jake said. Thank you, Matriarch Kesavara. She nodded, seeming satisfied with his response. She said something to her warriors and they began to move. Two of them approached Jake and he tensed, but they only offered to help him walk. His injuries were worse than he had wanted to admit and his shoulder was bleeding again. Shiana refused to leave his side as they traveled. She walked close to him, occasionally taking his hand or chattering at him in her language. When he stumbled on a root, she tried to steady him despite being a fraction of his size. It would have been funny if it was not so touching. The journey to their city took several hours. The path wound through the jungle, following trails that Jake never would have found on his own. As they walked, he noticed that the jungle gradually changed. The trees grew larger and the vegetation was more carefully managed. They were approaching civilization. When they finally emerged from the jungle, Jake stopped and stared. The city before him was unlike anything he had ever seen. Massive trees served as the foundation for structures that seemed to grow organically from the trunks and branches. Buildings of crystal and metal spiraled upward, connected by bridges that glowed softly. Technology and nature were woven together so completely that it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. Welcome to Kesathara, Kesavara said, watching his reaction with what might have been amusement. The heart of our people. They entered through a large gate where more warriors stood guard. Word of their arrival must have spread quickly, because people stopped to watch as they passed. Jake felt dozens of eyes on him, studying this strange alien who walked among them. Some looked curious, others suspicious, but none looked hostile. Shiana seemed proud to be walking beside him. She waved to people she knew and called out in her language, probably telling everyone who would listen about her adventure. Several times adult Zinthari approached Kesavara and spoke to her in low, urgent tones. She responded firmly each time, though Jake could not understand what was being said. They climbed through the city, moving upward along ramps and stairs carved into the massive trees. Finally, they reached a large structure near the top of the city. It was clearly important, with guards at every entrance and crystal spires that caught the sunlight. This is my home, Kesavara said. You will stay here as my guest. They entered through doors that opened silently at their approach. Inside, the building was spacious and beautiful. Natural light filtered through crystal walls and water flowed in channels through the floor, creating a peaceful sound. Furniture was minimal but elegant, designed for the Zinthari form but not uncomfortable for humans. A healer was already waiting, an older Zinthari with patterns that glowed soft purple. She examined Jake with professional efficiency, making concerned sounds at his injuries. She spoke to Kesavara, who nodded. Healer Vasana says your wounds need proper treatment, Kesavara translated. She will take care of you now. Shiana and I will leave you to rest. But Shiana made a distressed sound and clung to Jake's hand. She clearly did not want to leave him. Kesavara spoke to her gently but firmly in their language. Shiana responded with what sounded like pleading. 3 days had passed since Jake learned he could not leave. 3 days of living in luxury while his heart ached for home. His quarters were beautiful. His needs were met before he even knew he had them, and everyone treated him with deep respect. But none of that changed the fact that he was a prisoner, even if nobody would use that word. He stood at the balcony again, watching the human ship orbit above. It had not left. Captain Lisa Bennett, the woman in command, was still trying to negotiate his release. Jake had been allowed to send her a message yesterday, carefully watched by Zinthari officials, telling her he was unharmed and well treated. What he could not say was how desperate he felt, how much he wanted to come home. You stand here every morning, a voice said behind him. Jake turned to find Kesavara standing in the doorway. Her patterns glowed softly in the early light. "Does it help to watch your ship?" "It reminds me that someone is trying," Jake said, not bothering to hide his frustration. "Even if you refuse to listen to them." "I have listened to your captain very carefully," Kesavara replied, moving to stand beside him at the railing. "She has offered technology exchanges, cultural ambassadors, mining rights on 3 uninhabited worlds in your territory, a formal alliance between our peoples. She is a skilled negotiator." "But you said no to everything," Jake said bitterly. "Yes," Kesavara agreed, "because none of those things address what is truly at stake here. This is not about politics or resources, Lieutenant Morrison. This is about honor and the sacred bonds of our people. I cannot trade those things away no matter what your captain offers." Jake turned to face her. "You say honor, but what honor is there in keeping someone against their will? I saved your daughter because it was the right thing to do. Are you really going to punish me for that?" Something flickered across Kesavara's face. "Pain, maybe, or conflict. From your perspective, I understand this feels like punishment. But from mine, I am protecting you. I'm honoring you. You risked your life for my child. How can I possibly let you return to a life where you might be endangered again? Where you might be sent to fight in wars or crash on hostile worlds? Here you are safe. Here you are valued. That is what the Kessler bond means." "I did not ask for that bond," Jake said quietly. "I just wanted to save a child." "I know," Kesavara said, and her voice was equally quiet. "But the bond exists whether you asked for it or not. Some things are bigger than individual choice, Lieutenant. Some things are sacred." She left him there, and Jake turned back to watch the ship. He felt more alone than he had ever felt in his life. Later that morning, Shiana came to visit as she did every day. Her face lit up when she saw him and she ran to hug him. Jake could not help but smile a little. Whatever else was happening, the child was innocent in all of this. She loved him with the simple, complete trust that only children could manage. "Guardian Jake," she said in careful, accented English. She had been learning his language with impressive speed. "Come, I want to show you something." She took his hand and led him through the building and out into the city. 2 guards followed at a discreet distance, always watching, always making sure he did not try to escape. Not that he would know where to go if he did. Shiana brought him to a garden high in the trees. It was a beautiful place with flowers that chimed in the breeze and pools of water that reflected the sky. She led him to a particular tree smaller than the others and pointed to it proudly. "This is mine," she announced. "Mother planted it when I was born. Every important person in my life gets to carve their mark on it. See, this is Mother's mark. This is Father's mark." Her voice grew sad when she mentioned her father, and Jake remembered that Kesavara had said she lost her mate. "This is Grandmother's mark. And this—" She pulled out a small knife and held it out to him. "This is where your mark goes." Jake looked at the knife, then at her hopeful face. "Shiana, I am not sure that is appropriate. I might not be here for very much longer." Her face fell and her patterns flickered with distress. "But you are my guardian. You saved me. You are family now. You have to put your mark on my tree, please." Jake knelt down to be at her eye level. "I would be honored to put my mark on your tree, little star. But you need to understand something. I have a family too, back on my world. I have a sister named Katie who is probably very worried about me right now. I have friends and a duty to my people. I want to stay in touch with you, but I cannot stay here forever." Shiana's eyes grew shiny with tears. "But Mother said you have to stay. She said the law requires it." "Your mother is trying to do what she thinks is right," Jake said gently. "But sometimes adults disagree about what right means. I think the right thing is for me to eventually go home, while still being your friend and guardian from far away." "That is not the same," Shiana said, and a tear rolled down her cheek. "How can you guard me if you are on another world?" Jake had no good answer for that. He pulled her into a hug and she clung to him, crying softly. Over her shoulder, he saw one of the guards watching with an unreadable expression. After a while, Shiana pulled back and wiped her eyes. She was trying to be brave. "Will you still put your mark on my tree, even if you leave someday?" "I will," Jake promised. He took the knife and carefully carved a simple mark into the bark. A star with 5 points like the stars of Earth. Like the nickname he had given her. When he finished, Shiana touched it gently, then threw her arms around him again. That evening, Jake was summoned to a formal meeting. He was led to a large chamber near the top of the city, where Kesavara waited with several other important-looking Zinthari. They all wore elaborate garments and their patterns glowed with formal intensity. Captain Lisa Bennett was there too, projected as a hologram. She was a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and an expression that had probably intimidated many enemies. Right now she looked exhausted. "Lieutenant Morrison," she said when she saw him. "Are you well? Have they harmed you in any way?" "I am physically fine, Captain," Jake replied, standing at attention out of habit. "I have been well treated, but I want to come home." "We are working on that," Lisa said firmly. She turned to Kesavara. "Matriarch, I have been authorized by the Human Colonial Council to make one final offer. We will establish a permanent embassy here on your world. We will share our medical technology, which I understand you have expressed interest in. We will provide educational exchanges for your youth to visit human worlds, and we will guarantee the security of your system against any outside threats. All of this in exchange for allowing Lieutenant Morrison to return to his people." It was a generous offer. Jake held his breath, hoping against hope that Kesavara would accept. But she shook her head slowly. "Captain Bennett, I respect your persistence. These offers are valuable, and under different circumstances, I would be pleased to discuss them. But you are trying to purchase something that is not for sale. Jake Morrison is bound to my family by the oldest and most sacred laws of our people. No amount of technology or political benefit can change that." "Then help me understand," Lisa said, leaning forward. "Explain to me why keeping a man against his will is considered honorable in your culture." One of the other Zenthari, an old male with silvery patterns, spoke up. His words were translated by the device he wore. "Captain, your species has laws about debt, do they not? If someone saves your life, you feel obligation." "Of course," Lisa agreed. "But we do not imprison our rescuers." "You misunderstand," the old Zenthari said. "It is not imprisonment. It is protection. In our history, thousands of years ago, our young were extremely vulnerable. Our survival as a species depended on every adult taking responsibility for protecting every child. Those who saved children from death were bonded to those families forever, because they had proven themselves willing to die for our future. This became instinct, then culture, then law. It is written into our very biology now. We literally cannot allow someone who has saved one of our young to be put in danger again. It would violate everything we are." Jake felt a chill. This was worse than he thought. It was not just law or custom. It was something fundamental to how these people were built. Lisa seemed to sense this too. Her expression hardened. "Matriarch Kesavara, I want you to understand something clearly. Lieutenant Morrison is a valued member of my crew and a citizen of the human colonies. If you continue to hold him, there will be consequences. I have been ordered to remain in orbit and await his release. I will not leave without him." "Then you will wait a very long time," Kesavara said calmly. "I understand you feel loyalty to your crew member. I respect that. But I feel something deeper than loyalty to my daughter and to the man who saved her. I feel a bond that transcends politics and species. I cannot release him, Captain." "I will not." The two women stared at each other across the holographic link. The tension in the room was suffocating. Finally, Jake spoke up. "Captain Bennett, I need to speak with you privately." "Matriarch, would that be possible?" Kesavara considered for a moment, then nodded. "We will give you 5 minutes alone." She gestured, and the other Zenthari left the chamber. The doors closed behind them. As soon as they were gone, Lisa's formal demeanor cracked. "Jake, I am so sorry. We are doing everything we can." The weeks blended together in a strange mix of comfort and frustration. Jake's days developed a routine that felt almost normal if he did not think too hard about the fact that he could not leave. Mornings with Shiana, who continued her English lessons and proudly showed him every part of her world. Afternoons studying the Zenthari language with teachers who seemed genuinely pleased by his progress. Evenings often spent with Kesavara, discussing everything from philosophy to the differences between their species. It was during one of these evening conversations that Jake began to truly understand the woman holding him captive. They sat on the balcony as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of purple and orange. Kesavara had brought a bottle of something that tasted like spiced honey, and they shared it in comfortable silence for a while. "Tell me about your mate," Jake said finally. "Shiana mentioned him once but got sad. You do not have to if you do not want to." Kesavara was quiet for so long that Jake thought she might not answer. Then she spoke, her voice soft. "His name was Teshvan. He was a warrior like me but gentler in spirit. He loved music and growing things. He used to sing to Shiana every night before she slept. Her patterns flickered with a sad, dim light. There was a border dispute with a neighboring clan 2 years ago. It should have been resolved through negotiation, but the other matriarch was young and proud. Fighting broke out. Tishvan was leading a patrol when they were ambushed. He died protecting his squad. "I am sorry," Jake said quietly. "So am I," Kesavara replied. Shiana was barely 4 years old. She still asks for him sometimes when she is very tired or frightened. Do you know what that is like, Lieutenant Morrison? To have to tell your child again and again that the person they love most in the world is never coming back? Jake shook his head. He could not imagine that pain. When she wandered off into the jungle when we could not find her for 2 days, I thought I would lose her too. Kesavara's voice cracked slightly. I thought I would have to live with the knowledge that I had failed to protect the only piece of Teshavan I had left. Do you understand now why I cannot let you go? You brought her back to me. You risked everything for her. How can I possibly allow you to return to a life where you might die on some distant world, where I cannot protect you as you protected her? Jake understood then, really understood what drove her. This was not about law or custom alone. It was about a mother's grief and terror and the desperate need to keep safe the things she loved. It did not make the situation right, but it made it human, or at least it made it understandable. I cannot imagine what that was like for you, Jake said carefully. But Kesavara, you have to understand something too. I have people who love me. My sister Katie, she is only 23 years old. Our parents died when we were young and we only had each other. Right now she thinks I might be dead or suffering. Every day I am here is another day she is in pain. Is it fair for me to save one child while causing another to suffer? Kesavara looked at him sharply. She is not a child. No, but she is my family. Just like Shiana is yours, and I am hurting her by being here against my will. They sat in silence after that, each wrestling with their own thoughts. Finally, Kesavara stood. I need to think about what you have said. Good night, Lieutenant Morrison. Jake, he said. If we are going to be family, you should call me Jake. She paused at the doorway and looked back at him. Good night, Jake. The next day brought an unexpected visitor. Jake was in the garden with Shiana, teaching her a human game with stones when a group of Zenthari approached. They wore the formal robes of officials and their expressions were not friendly. The leader was a tall male with dark blue patterns that pulsed aggressively. He spoke rapidly in the Zenthari language, his tone accusatory. Shiana shrank back against Jake, clearly frightened. What is happening? Jake asked, his hand moving protectively to Shiana's shoulder. One of the guards who followed him everywhere stepped forward. This is Counselor Reshitar. He is demanding to speak with you. He is not happy about your presence in our city. Reshtar switched to using a translator device. Human, you have caused great disruption to our people. The matriarch refuses to negotiate with your kind because of you. She wastes resources protecting and honoring an alien, when she should be focused on her duties to us. This bond you claim is being used to manipulate our laws. I claim nothing, Jake said, keeping his voice level despite his rising anger. I saved a child. Your matriarch is the one who invoked this bond, not me. If you have problems with the situation, take them up with her. Oh, we intend to, Reshitar said coldly. There is a faction among the council who believe you should be removed from the city. The bond may be sacred, but it was never meant to apply to aliens. You are a corruption of our ways. Uncle Reshitar, stop it. Shiana suddenly spoke up, her small voice fierce. Jake is not corrupt. He saved my life. He is good. Child, you do not understand politics, Reshitar said dismissively. Return to your lessons. But Shiana stood her ground, moving to place herself between Jake and the counselor. No, Jake is my guardian. You cannot send him away. The confrontation was interrupted by Kesavara's arrival. She moved through the garden like a storm, her patterns blazing bright with anger. Counselor Reshitar, you are not given permission to approach my guest. He is not a guest, matriarch. He is a problem, Reshtar replied, not backing down. The council will be voting on whether to allow him to remain in the city. We have that right under the old laws. And I have the right as matriarch to protect those under my care. Kesavara shot back. If the council wants to challenge me on this, let them try. But they will find I am not easily moved. Reshitar bowed slightly, a gesture that did not feel respectful. We shall see, matriarch. He turned and left with his followers. After they were gone, Kesavara knelt beside Shiana. Are you all right, little flame? I am fine, mother. But why is Uncle Reshitar so mean to Jake? Because some people fear what they do not understand, Kesavara said quietly. She looked up at Jake. I apologize. I did not think my political opponents would approach you directly. It is not your fault, Jake said. But he has a point, does he not? My being here is causing problems for you. Nothing I cannot handle, Kesavara assured him, but Jake could see the worry in her patterns. That evening, Jake made a decision. He had been passive for too long, letting others debate his fate. It was time to take some control back. He sought out Kesavara in her private study, where she was reviewing documents that glowed with Zenthari script. I want to learn more about your people, he announced. Not just the language and the culture, but the history, the laws, everything. If I am going to be bound to you by this Kesathor, then I should understand it completely. I want access to your libraries and records. Kesavara looked surprised. Why this sudden interest? Because I have been fighting against something I do not fully understand, Jake admitted. Maybe if I learn more about your ways, I can find a solution that honors your laws while also allowing me some freedom. At the very least, I can stop feeling like a victim and start being an active part of this situation. Kesavara studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded. Very well. I will arrange it. But Jake, you should know that many have studied these laws for lifetimes. If there was an easy solution, we would have found it already. Maybe, Jake agreed. But maybe it takes an outsider to see what those inside cannot. Over the following weeks, Jake buried himself in study. The Zenthari kept extensive records and their libraries were vast. He learned about the ancient times when their species had barely survived as prey animals, hunted by massive predators. He learned how they had evolved complex social bonds as a survival mechanism, how protecting the young had become not just instinct, but sacred duty. He read about the Kes-Thor bond in detail. It had been invoked thousands of times throughout history, almost always between Zenthari. There were only 3 recorded cases of it being applied to other species, and in each case the alien had eventually integrated fully into Zenthari society, living among them for the rest of their lives. The laws were clear. Once the bond was formed, it could only be broken in very specific ways. Death of either party. A formal declaration by the one who was saved that the savior had become a danger to them. Or, and this was the interesting part, mutual agreement that the bond had been fulfilled through years of service and protection. But that last option had never been invoked in less than a decade, usually much longer. The bond was meant to last a lifetime. Jake also learned about Zenthari politics. Kesavara's position as matriarch was not absolute. She ruled with the consent of a council of elders and prominent citizens. If enough of them turned against her, she could be challenged and possibly replaced. Reshtar was building support among those who feared human influence and wanted to isolate their species from outsiders. The situation was more complex than Jake had realized. It was not just about him and Kesavara anymore. It was about the future relationship between their species, about tradition versus change, about fear and hope. One night, unable to sleep, Jake was walking through the quiet halls when the attack came without warning on a quiet afternoon. Jake was in the library, deep in research about historical applications of the Kes-Thor bond, when the first explosion shook the building. The lights flickered and alarms began wailing throughout the city. One of his guards burst into the room. We are under attack. Councillor Reshitar has made his move. He has armed supporters and they are trying to take the council chamber. You need to come with me to a secure location. Where is Shiana? Jake demanded, already moving toward the door. With her tutors in the eastern wing, the guard replied, leading him quickly through the corridors. The matriarch's personal guard will protect her. They had barely made it down 2 levels when they encountered a group of armed Zenthari in dark uniforms. These were not the ceremonial guards Jake was used to seeing. These carried serious weapons and had the look of trained soldiers. There he is, one of them shouted, pointing at Jake. The human corrupts our matriarch. Seize him. Jake's guards moved to intercept, but they were outnumbered. Energy weapons fired and one of his guards went down. The other pushed Jake toward a side corridor. Run, get to the matriarch. Jake ran, his heart pounding. Behind him, he could hear the sounds of fighting. The building shook with another explosion, closer this time. Smoke filled the hallways and emergency lights cast everything in an eerie red glow. He had to find Shiana. The eastern wing, the guard had said. Jake oriented himself and changed direction, running through passages he had learned during his weeks here. He could hear fighting throughout the building now, shouts and weapon fire echoing from multiple directions. When he reached the eastern wing, he found chaos. Several tutors were trying to evacuate students while guards held off attackers. Jake spotted Shiana immediately. She was pressed against a wall, her patterns flickering with terror, frozen with fear while the battle raged around her. "Shiana!" Jake shouted over the noise. Her head snapped toward him and her eyes went wide. "Jake!" He pushed through the crowd toward her, but another explosion tore through the corridor between them. The floor buckled and part of the ceiling came down. When the dust cleared, Jake found himself separated from Shiana by a wall of rubble and flames. Through the smoke, he could see her on the other side, crying and reaching for him, and he could see armed rebels moving toward her position, their attention focused on the guards who were protecting the other children. Jake did not hesitate. He had no weapon, no armor, and no plan, but he had promised to be her guardian, and he would not break that promise now. He climbed over the rubble, ignoring the heat of the flames, ignoring the pain as sharp metal cut his hands and arms. A rebel spotted him and raised his weapon, but Jake was already moving. He tackled the Zenthari, using his different physiology and lower center of gravity to his advantage. They went down together and Jake wrestled the energy weapon away, then used it like a club to knock the rebel unconscious. Another attacker came at him and Jake barely dodged the energy blast that singed his shoulder. He fired back with the captured weapon, his military training taking over. The shot hit true and the attacker fell. "Shiana, come on!" Jake shouted, reaching through the flames to grab her hand. He pulled her through the gap in the rubble, shielding her with his body from the heat and debris. They ran together through the damaged corridor, Jake leading her toward where he hoped they would find loyal guards. Behind them, more rebels were coming. Jake turned and fired several times, forcing them to take cover. They rounded a corner and nearly collided with Kesavara. The matriarch was in full battle armor, her personal guard around her, and she was magnificent and terrifying in her fury. Her patterns blazed like fire, and she held a weapon that hummed with deadly power. "Mother," Shiana cried, running to her. Kesavara caught her daughter, but her eyes were locked on Jake. She saw his injuries, the blood running down his arms, the burns on his shoulder. She saw the weapon in his hands and the determined set of his jaw. "Get her to safety," Jake said, handing Shiana over. "I will help hold them off." "You are not a soldier here," Kesavara said, but there was something in her voice, a recognition of what he had just done. "I am today," Jake replied. He took position with her guards, weapon ready. What followed was chaos. The battle raged through the building as Reshitar's supporters tried to take control, and Kesavara's forces fought to stop them. Jake fought alongside the Zenthari guards, his human tactics surprising their enemies more than once. He was faster than they expected, moved differently, thought differently, but he was also more vulnerable. When an explosion tore through the corridor they were defending, Jake was caught in the blast. He felt himself thrown through the air, felt the impact as he hit the wall, felt a sharp, terrible pain in his chest. He could not breathe. The world went fuzzy and dark around the edges. Through the ringing in his ears, he heard Shiana screaming his name. He felt hands on him, lifting him. Then nothing. When Jake woke, everything hurt. His chest felt like it was being crushed and his breathing came in short, painful gasps. He tried to move but found he could not. Slowly, his eyes focused on the room around him. He was in the medical facility. Healer Vesana was beside him, along with several other medical staff. Their hands moved over strange devices that surrounded his body, their faces intent with concentration. And Kesavara was there. She sat beside his bed, still in her battle armor, though the fighting had clearly ended. Her hand held his, and her patterns were dim with exhaustion and worry. "You're awake," she said softly when she noticed his eyes open. "Do not try to speak. Your lung was punctured by shrapnel. Vesana has been working on you for hours." Jake tried anyway. "Shiana?" he rasped. "Safe," Kesavara assured him. "Because of you. You should not have fought. You should not have risked yourself." "But you did. You saved her again." The healer made a sharp gesture and said something in Zenthari. Kesavara nodded and stood, squeezing Jake's hand before letting go. "Rest now. We will talk when you are healed." Sleep claimed him again. The recovery was longer this time. Jake spent 3 days drifting in and out of consciousness. When he finally woke fully, Shiana was sitting beside his bed, her small hand holding his. She had clearly been there for a while. "You came back," she whispered when she saw his eyes open. "I was so scared you would not come back." "I promised I would always protect you," Jake said, his voice rough but stronger than before. "I keep my promises." She climbed carefully onto the bed and curled up against his side, mindful of his injuries. "I love you, Guardian Jake." Jake felt his heart clench. "I love you too, little star." Over the next week as he healed, Jake learned what had happened. Reshtar's coup had failed. Most of his supporters had been captured and Reshitar himself was under arrest. The council had officially condemned the attack and reaffirmed their support for Kesavara's leadership, but the rebellion had revealed the deep divisions in Zenthari society about contact with other species. Some, like Kesavara, saw it as an opportunity. Others, like Reshitar, saw it as a threat. Jake also learned that his actions during the attack had become famous. The story of the human who had fought to protect a Zenthari child, who had been wounded defending her people, had spread through the city. Many who had been uncertain about him before now viewed him with respect and gratitude. On the 8th day of his recovery, Kesavara came to see him. She dismissed the attendants, leaving them alone. She sat beside his bed, and for a long time she just looked at him. "I have been thinking," she said finally, "about everything that has happened, about what you said weeks ago about your sister and your people, about what Elder Mithara said to me, about what you did during the attack." Jake waited, sensing this was important. "You could have fled during the chaos," Kesavara continued. "The city was in confusion. My guards were focused on the battle. You could have tried to escape to reach your people's ship, but instead you ran toward danger. You risked your life again for my daughter. You fought for us, bled for us, nearly died for us, and of course I did," Jake said simply. "That is what guardians do." Kesavara closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, they were wet with tears. Zenthari rarely cried, and Jake had never seen her show such vulnerability. "I understand now," she said, her voice breaking. "I understand what Elder Mithara tried to tell me. I have been holding you here not because the law demands it, but because I was afraid of losing another person I care about. Afraid of failing to protect someone again. But true protection is not about keeping someone in a cage, no matter how beautiful that cage might be." She stood and moved to the window, looking out over the city. "The Kesathor bond says that you are my daughter's guardian. It says you are bound to our family, but it does not specify where you must be or how you must live. I have been interpreting it through my fear rather than through wisdom." Jake sat up slowly, ignoring the protest from his still healing injuries. "What are you saying?" Kesavara turned to face him. "I am saying that I release you, not from the bond that can never be broken, but from the obligation to stay here against your will. You may return to your people if that is what you choose." Hope and relief flooded through Jake, but also something more complicated. "Just like that? After months of refusing?" "Not just like that," Kesavara said quietly.